but that's been a safety way to get you to where you are today. There's a reason where you are today. So I don't want you to be angry at it. I don't want you to be mad at it or frustrated. I want you to thank it.
Today, my friends, we are meeting the one and only Jessica Metcalfe, this incredible dentist. She is a specialist in treating oncology patients, but she is so much more than that. Dr. Metcalfe is also an international speaker, a life and business coach, and today we're talking about how to unlock your happiness. And Dr. Metcalfe gives us the keys to doing so. And one of the focal points you're going to hear about is how your inner narrative is what is keeping you stuck, or possibly what can launch you to your greatest potential and your happiness. We talk about all the juicy things like imposter syndrome and decision fatigue. You're going to love this episode. If any of these terms are ringing bells with you, or if you recognize yourself in any of these, then today you are in luck, my friends, because today we are sharing this incredible episode and you will find so much value here. Join me in welcoming Jessica Metcalfe. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a great day. I am so excited to share with you the expertise and the presence of this incredible human, Dr. Jessica Metcalfe. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here with you today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And for anybody who's watching this on YouTube, we have a cute Portuguese water dog in the background showing off her cute little bum. What is her name?
Her name is Artemis.
Artemis. Okay, welcome, Artemis. Welcome to the Business of Happiness. Dr. Metcalfe, tell us all about yourself. I am in love with what you're doing, with the incredible work that you're doing in this world, with the support that you are giving to our dental colleagues and medical colleagues and business owners. Share with us a little bit about what you do.
So a few years ago, I was experiencing my own burnout, and it was the third one at the time. And when I started to realize that I needed a little bit of help and I reached out, I was then diagnosed with clinical depression and a generalized anxiety disorder. And I just put my head down and I was grinding 6-7 days a week. And everyone around me was telling me that it's okay, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. But better never came. And I didn't understand what I needed to change. And so when I asked the question, well, why do we experience what we experience in dentistry? I kind of stumbled down this rabbit hole of primary research articles, textbooks, and really wanted to put everything together. And then when I finally started to heal, it was around the same time that I was already speaking to general dentists about how to treat the cancer patient. And a part of that curriculum is improving patients' quality of life. And what I noticed is what I started to do is add in tidbits on how to improve the dentist's quality of life as well. And that finally became a point in time where I realized I've healed enough. I can actually start sharing my own story. And that led me to opening the Alchemist Dentist. So then I could help others. So then they know they don't have to go it alone.
Oh, and it's such a gift that you do this for our community, because there are so many men and women suffering, these extreme high achievers, men and women showing up regularly on a daily basis. They know how to grind. They know how to compound that commitment and the conviction of their actions on a daily basis, and they see enormous success from it. But you are right. So many of them are hurting.
Yeah. And the problem is that we're still in a day and age, and it's starting to become more open, where people felt that they have to hide. Because even when I started to share my own story, some of the comments that I used to get initially, because when I did share my story initially, I wasn't sharing my story. I was asking for a friend because I didn't know what people were going to say at that point in time. And some of the stuff that I heard wasn't the nicest. So it made sense on why within the dental community, we don't ask for help, or we don't get the help that we need from a support system because we're afraid to even bring these topics up.
I think, and tell me if you agree, I think also as a business owner, we have to maintain this persona that I've got this. Don't worry, I've got everything under control right now. And so it's almost antithetical to what we were taught in terms of presenting this persona of I've got everything under control.
Yeah, 100%. And when we start to look at perfectionism, which we have those perfectionist tendencies, and always wanting to make the people around us happy, whether it's patients, our staff, even our family members and our friends, that combination of perfectionism and people pleasing doesn't allow us to create boundaries around our own mental and physical health. And that can then overflow where we're not giving ourselves breaks. And so we get to a point where we're resentful of even our peers.
Absolutely. And there's this badge of honor that people seem to wear when they just keep showing up, even if they're depleted, even if they're in pain, even if they're hurt. Yeah. So what do you offer? I mean, when you said you started to infuse in your presentations when you were speaking on a stage, you started to infuse some tidbits and support for caretakers and people in the medical and dental world to take care of themselves. What kind of suggestions were you making when you started out? What are those little first steps people can take?
So one of the first steps is actually to even create a self-awareness around what is actually happening right now, because you could go and get all of the help that you need, but if you're not willing and open to it and being aware of where you are in your own stage, then that's then hard to be able to even ask for help. So one of the first things that I like to ask people is, well, how do you choose to speak to yourself? Because being that high achiever, being that high performer, the business owner, the dentist, what ends up happening is that we got used to listening to ourselves saying, well, I can't do this. But then we try to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And then when something goes wrong, we don't actually take a moment to reflect on the day. We just beat ourselves up based on what ended up happening. And so in those moments, it becomes so easy to be our own bully without even noticing that it's happening.
Absolutely. And after doing that for years and years and decades, you've become really well practiced and really good at it. It's really hard to turn that ship around. So how do you coach your clients in terms of how to have a different conversation with themselves?
So one of my huge expertise is imposter syndrome, and both men and women experience it. High achievers tend to experience it the most. And so imposter syndrome is where you have self-doubt coupled with the fear that you're going to be found out, that you shouldn't be the one doing this. So you chalk it up to luck, you explain away your successes or your capabilities, and you never actually move forward. So you can keep yourself very stuck. And a part of that process is, as that doubt starts to come up, it feels uncomfortable inside of us, right? Doubt isn't all fun and joy or anything like that. And that uncomfortableness leads us to our perfectionist mindset. And that perfectionist mindset either has us heading down the path of procrastination or overworking. And that overworking mentality is where we just keep grinding and grinding and grinding. And the thing is that whether you procrastinate, not out of laziness, because you don't want to feel uncomfortable, so you just put it off, right? So you either head down that path of procrastination or overworking. And the thing with experiencing imposter syndrome is that you will always be successful. So these high achievers, high performers who are successful then discount their success. And so when they look back at everything, they say, okay, well, chalk it up to luck. Or because you overworked at that point in time, you then say, well, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to replicate that again. So what I do is we create checkpoints. How do we understand our self-doubt? How do we understand how that presents within us? What are our perfectionist tendencies? What's it causing us to do? And how do we actually acknowledge our wins?
So what practice do you have for yourself for acknowledging your wins?
So one of them one thing in particular that I like to start with all of my clients is something called a positive investment container. It could be something digital. It could be something that's a shoebox, a Tupperware container. Mine is a wall. And as those small wins come up, anything that makes you feel neutral or positive, you need to start cataloging these things. So then that way you can actually start to see what you are doing instead of just lifting up the rug and kind of shooing it under and being like, okay, well, I'll just get to the next thing.
You're building a body of evidence for yourself.
Yeah. The evidence at this point in time is there, right? You've graduated from your school. You have put all this extra effort in. You've likely taken CE. You're likely a business owner or have worked many years. And at this point, you can still experience imposter syndrome because you never actually took the time to look back at the evidence and reflect on it.
So, it's one thing to have the evidence in front of you, as you just said, you've graduated. It's another thing to actually take ownership of that.
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you suggest people do that if they've been out of practice with that, if they're not used to that? And once again, we're speaking to that imposter syndrome, right? When you can see the evidence of it, but you keep excusing it with somebody else was the one that was really responsible for that, or somebody else taught me how, or I'm not sure I could have done it without somebody else's help. How do you help make that connection, that kind of intimate connection with their worthiness?
So one of them is by starting now that proof, having that physical entity, you can then start to go back and look at it. So that's one component of it. The second is actually taking a moment and not comparing yourself to someone else. Because it is so easy to hop on social media or to go to conferences and you see the perfect cases and the perfect life and think, well, why don't I have that? Right? So what I recommend at that point in time is really starting to narrow in what you're seeing on social media. How do you pay attention to who you're then talking to? And are those individuals the people who you would want to hear from their opinions or you would go to for advice? And if those aren't those people, then I recommend, and I realize this is harsh, but don't listen to them. Because at that point in time, those aren't the individuals that you truly want advice from, that you truly want their opinion from. So when you take that component of it, where you start to reduce comparison, you lean on the individuals who you absolutely trust, and you start to build up your positive investment container, you have now created a mental boundary around how you choose to see yourself.
I like that. I like that a lot. So is this what you practiced when you were coming out of your funk before? If you don't mind, take us back a little bit. Explain to us how that came about, that feeling of despair that you found yourself in. What led up to that?
You know what? I don't think that there was one particular thing that led up to it. It had been accumulation of things that I had been doing to myself over the years. And so, for instance, the way that I chose to speak to myself, your inner narrative has a huge impact on how you choose to see yourself, how you choose to see your friends, your family, the world around you. And for a very long time, I had used a way to motivate myself that wasn't the kindest. And because of that, it became very easy to then wear it as a badge of honor where you're working extended hours or you didn't sleep the night before. And so it's okay to be burnt out. Like that's the norm. That's what it should be. And even in the middle of residency, I remember having food poisoning and being up all night. And I went into clinic and I looked like dirt. And at this point in time, it was when we weren't wearing masks. It was pre-COVID. And I remember walking in and like, okay, it's that mentality. You have to show up. You've got to grind. You've got to prove yourself. And now I look back, I'm like, who was I proving myself to? But I remember one of the receptionists being like, you need to leave. Like, you can't be here. But I needed those individuals in my court to recognize what I couldn't even see in myself at that point. So when I started to pay attention to that voice, I recognized that it didn't need to be that way anymore. And so a large portion of working through my anxiety, through procedures that even procedures I would do on a regular basis, all of a sudden I get to go giving a block and all of a sudden my heart would be racing. Or I've done one more extraction and now I'm dripping sweat like you wouldn't believe, and I'm only starting to elevate. And so when I started to pick up on cues, I started to recognize, okay, these are the areas that I need to start to be aware of, and how do I change what sets off my anxiety?
So it sounds like very similar to the advice that you give your clients in terms of which voices on social media do you choose to listen to. You were making those same choices in your head. Which voices in your head you were choosing to listen to.
Exactly.
What do you think is the most common mistake you see in your clients and in the people who you speak to in the medical and dental world in terms of negative impact on their self-worth?
Oh man, it's honestly, it's heartbreaking to see at times, because we've worked so hard to get to where we are today. And it could be even as little as not thinking you deserve to take a break.
Yeah.
Because you need to be there for your patients, or that something's going to fall apart if you're not there. And that puts an enormous amount of pressure on you as an individual. And when you link your self-worth to the ability of aiming for perfection, that's where you can head down this spiral, because there's no such thing as perfection. Your perfection and my perfection are based on perspectives. And so when we start to link that and then beat ourselves up about it, we kind of just get stuck in survival mode. And when we get stuck in survival mode, it's really hard to see it, because burnout's a slow grind that happens. So it's complex, it's dynamic, and it doesn't happen overnight, which means it's not going to go away overnight. And so with being in dentistry, we like things to have results immediately, right? We take an extraction out, we suture, procedure's done. Class 2, drill, restore, send the patient home, it's done. Besides ortho, which takes a couple of years. Right? And that's the mentality that we need to start to incorporate, is if I need to reduce from 5 days to 4 days, to also then account for the fact that I need to run a business instead of trying to cram everything all in one day, then you don't get to the end of the day where you're depleted and you're sitting in front of the TV, and instead of you watching it, it's watching you.
Wow, that's a powerful image. Yes, that's a very powerful image. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. So here you are, you realized that you have this great gift to share with the world. So you thought, I've got to be bringing this to my community. You saw the pain that men and women and leaders were in.
Yeah.
And so you decided to start another business. To me, this sounds like taking on more, working more. And I say this with all the love in the world, Jessica, because I'm right there with you, my friend.
Of course.
How do you, for yourself, navigate this new world of this great new passion that you have to share this insight with our colleagues, but also supporting your patients and your world in the dental world, and then also in the coaching world? So how do you balance all of these things with supporting your own integrity and your own health?
100%. So 7 months ago, I moved across the country for that reason. I was like, I need to practice what I preach. And so by doing that, I left the cancer center that I was at full time. And at the cancer center, I was a full-time staff dentist, education director, and clinical investigator and a special projects manager. And there was no way that I was going to be able to do both. And what I decided was, well, what am I missing at this
I'm just
point?
going to stop you there because it wasn't even just both. It's that added up to about 5 or 6, Jessica.
I know.
You said there's no way I could do both. And I was like, I'm up to 6.
I was just at the hospital too. So that was, yeah. So, and I was like, I can't keep doing everything. And so one of the things that I learned was how to ask for help. And so during that time, while I was still a full-time staff dentist, I hired part of an operations team to be able to kind of help on the back end of stuff. So then I was able to do what I do best, which is education, and put curriculum together and coach individuals. So while I was at the hospital, I realized that this wasn't sustainable. And so I made a life change in the sense that I asked myself, well, what do I want? And a large part of that is I needed to be more outdoors. I felt like that was a huge part of my life that was missing. And being in the city, I didn't have it as easily accessible as what I needed for me. Now, I recognize not everyone's an outdoorsy person, so that's completely fine, but it's being able to cultivate a life that you truly want. And so when I moved across this country, I moved onto an island that I realized I have both city. I still have the cancer center that I'm in affiliation with, but I only work 1 to 2 days of clinical dentistry a week. And the other time I fill with being outside and doing coaching and teaching.
That's beautiful. And what you did so beautifully in that practice was tucking into your values and what was important to you and not what someone else expected of you.
Exactly. Which I think at times we do when we either graduate dentistry or we're early starting off, or even if you're at the same place and you're not expanding how you can have the capability to do dentistry however you choose, you feel like, well, there's only one way to do dentistry. And then you get stuck doing it that one way for a decade, 2 decades. And that's when I noticed something was wrong, when I started to wish away the next 25, 30 years of my career, just so I could make it to retirement, because everyone always said that, oh, when she gets to retirement, you're so happy. So I was like, all I want to be is happy. And if I could get there, then I could start living my life. But to wish away 2.5 decades of your life, oof, looking back now, like that was a bad state to be in.
Mm-hmm. I think that I'm so grateful to you for sharing that, because I think so many men and women are hearing that voice right now in their own self-talk and just wishing their lives away.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your greatest challenge now? What is the greatest struggle that you have at this point in your career?
Greatest struggle is I feel like my own voice has always said, you have to be busy. You have to be busy all the time. And practicing self-compassion is extremely hard. And so I have my own coaches for that reason too. And so that is the one thing that I appreciate is you're never done learning. Whether it's medicine, dentistry, business, personal growth, evolving as a human being, you are never done learning, which means then you can always ask for help. And so when I look now at a challenge of mine, it's slipping back into that you have to be busy all the time. If you don't fill the hour, then you're lazy. And there's that voice again where is it lazy, or do you actually need a rest right now? Take a break. And so when you have people in your corner, building self-compassion becomes that much easier. And so although it's a challenge that is something that can come up from time to time, it's a challenge that doesn't keep me stuck anymore.
That's beautiful. I think that's so beautifully said, especially the aspect of finding community and support and accountability for self-compassion. I mean, even that needs accountability from time to time. Isn't that crazy? So what do you think is your superpower?
My superpower is being able to ask questions so you can see a different perspective. It is being able to ask the questions you didn't even know you could ask yourself. And along the way, I get to laugh with the individuals that I work with. And I think that that makes a huge difference. It's having someone there to let you know you are in a safe space to now answer them.
Oh, that's beautiful. And, I think that one of the things you do so beautifully, you present that so beautifully on your social media, but you do it so beautifully in your blogs as well, on your website. And I can only imagine in person on your coaching, you actually offer this amazing coaching program that you were telling me about, the Empowering Women Dentists program. Please tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure so many women would be eager to know about it.
So I am so in love with this program. The curriculum has taken me about 2 years to grow, and it involves imposter syndrome, perfectionism, burnout, but also anxiety, decision fatigue, really starting to help us with the questions that we didn't even realize we needed help with, how to set boundaries. And this program, which I'm super proud of, creates a supportive environment for individuals to not only share their doubts and the fears of what's going on, but also the joys and awesomeness. And it's the first one of its kind, and you get 24 CE credits for taking care of yourself.
Like, so cool.
I love it.
I know. I wish everybody was watching the YouTube version of this, because your smile and your whole face is just beaming talking about this beautiful, beautiful course that you have birthed here. And I can just tell you've poured your heart into.
Thank you.
Super cool. So I don't want to skim over something that you mentioned in there before I ask you some of our final questions, but you mentioned decision fatigue. And I love that you touched on that, because I think we don't talk about that enough in this arena either. And I'm guessing somebody was listening to you and heard that word and thought, oh, what is that? And maybe that's me, because that sounds like me at the end of the day or at the end of the week. Tell us a little bit about decision fatigue and how that impacts our community.
So decision fatigue, you tend to experience if you've got a bit of brain fog, and can be in conjunction with burnout. So it's hard to get going and stay going and keep your mind in an acute manner. And that could be because of lack of sleep, because of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, or cynicism. But all of what that is burnout at the end of the day. And so when you feel like you're stuck in decision fatigue, it's giving yourself the opportunity and taking the pressure off of yourself to be able to walk away from that moment in time, whether it's purchasing a car, an office, or treatment planning. It's giving yourself the time to be like, okay, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, maybe I'm not in the greatest mood. I don't need to make that decision right this minute. So giving yourself time back allows you to step away from that moment, so you don't feel like you're pressured, especially even if it comes within treatment planning appointments. We always think that we need to have the answers right away. We're fixers, we're interventionalists, right? So we want to have the answers. We want the solutions to be able to fix the problems at hand, fix the emergency that comes in. But it is totally okay to say, hey, you know what? I don't have an answer right now. Let me get back to you in 2 days. And by you giving yourself the opportunity to allow for time in there, it also allows your brain subconsciously to calm down, which means when you step away from that stressful environment, your brain's going to come up with so many more solutions than you even thought imaginable. And when that happens, you can take the pressure off yourself, you gave yourself the time, and you can reduce your decision fatigue that's happening in the moment.
I love that practice, because it is this phantom time warden that we put on ourselves, and it really isn't the truth. We give ourselves this idea that there's some scarcity of time or lack of time. In fact, it's one of those things that I hear a lot of business owners and dentists saying is there's just not enough time. They always feel this pressure of time. And I love that permission you just gave to let that fallacy go.
Yeah. The decision fatigue and the time component. Oh my goodness. I love that you brought this up, because when people say that there's not enough time. It's because we're being pulled in a million different directions.
Yeah.
And when that ends up happening, we're having to switch our mind to the next hat that we wear. So let's say, for instance, you're doing clinical, then you're getting pulled into something business related. When that ends up happening, you lose track of what you were just working on, and it can take you up to 20 minutes to actually get back into the groove. So that alone is expending energy and time. So if we can figure out how to chunk your schedule, and this is where anyone in a day forgets to incorporate, where maybe it's going to take me 15 minutes to write emails or respond to certain things. But we think that 8 to 5 is potentially when we're seeing patients. And when that ends up happening, then we're now stuck with all these extra hours that we've got to do charts, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, right? And that overflows into other aspects of our lives and takes time away from you resting. We really need to incorporate chart time, huddle time, whatever else that you're doing, answering emails, back into the actual day and chunk them. So then that way you're not being split with your mind in that sense.
Oh, but we tell ourselves it feels so good to multitask and we're so good at it. And especially women, we pride ourselves on multitasking. And I think you've just hit on a great point, is how depleting it really is.
Mm-hmm. It's so depleting. It's so interesting because now on the days that I'm not doing clinical, my days, I have to be super structured with them. Otherwise, it is so easy for me to just sit an entire day and answer emails. So creating that blocks of time, so that means an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, are the only times that I check my email. There's no true emergency. If there is a true emergency, that individual has my phone number. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, chunk that. Then what I'm able to do is build my education, build the curriculum, work with clients. Then it also takes the pressure off of yourself thinking that, but what if so-and-so emails me? Okay, I forgot to respond. Because at that point in time, you've already put boundaries around when you're going to be checking emails. And that's just one example.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. All right. The burning question. What is your definition of happiness for yourself?
I haven't had to answer this in a while. So my definition of happiness is being on a mountain on a crisp day, looking just a little bit out, and my pup kind of walking around, jumping around, sniffing, and she turns back to me and she's just so excited to be there. That is my definition of happiness right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with the world. And thank you for moving across Canada to give more time to the people who need you. I am so grateful to you, and thank you for all that you do.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me, and continue to spread happiness, because it is so easy to get stuck in doom and gloom right now. And to be able to share that takes a very special individual. So thank you for being that person.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Before we leave, I'd love you to leave our audience with one piece of wisdom, some words of advice of how to better find their inner wisdom and how to better tuck into that knowledge of who they are, separate from the expectations of others.
When you do decide to look inward, know that it's going to may or may not be dark initially, because you've spoken to yourself in such a negative way for a long time. But that's been a safety way to get you to where you are today. There's a reason where you are today. So I don't want you to be angry at it. I don't want you to be mad at it or frustrated. I want you to thank it. But then I want you to acknowledge the fact that there's a different way to speak to yourself.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'm gonna leave you here picturing you up on that mountain with your sweet pup at your knees. I love that image. And I just wanted to say thank you again and wishing you a spectacular 2022, my friend.
Thank you so much.